In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade rumors around the Chicago Blackhawks. Could they actually find a way to move the Seth Jones contract? Could we see a trade between the Montreal Canadiens and Boston Bruins over the next few months as the Bruins blue line becomes a little bit healthier? We have more news from the waiver wire. We have another suspension, Board of Governors meetings going on in New York City, several injury updates, and reactions from around last night's action. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover here today and some trade talk as well. First up, news from the NHL waiver wire. Yesterday we had Anders Bjork of the Buffalo Sabres on waivers. He has indeed cleared, and the Buffalo Sabres have already announced that he is being demoted to the American Hockey League to Rochester. So Bjork will be sent down, and we have another player on waivers today, and that's the Colorado Avalanche placing forward Lukas Sedlak on waivers as well. So far this year, he appeared in 3 games for the Avs, not registering any points. So we'll find out tomorrow afternoon if Sedlak is going to clear and be assigned to the minors, or if another team will pick him up and give him an opportunity. Now we have our first suspension of the NHL regular season. Washington Capitals center iceman Evgeny Kuznetsov has been suspended for 1 game, and to be completely honest, I'm a little bit surprised it's not more. The NHL Department of Player Safety made an announcement earlier this afternoon that he's being suspended for 1 game due to a high stick to the face of Canucks player Kyle Burroughs, which happened in last night's action. You can tell if you haven't seen the play, definitely check out the replay. Kuznetsov, in my opinion, drives to the net, ends up getting up after he goes down. He makes a little bit of a collision with Burroughs, and as he gets up, he intentionally whacks him with a stick. Now, he might not have intentionally tried to hit him in the face. When he's talking to player safety, apparently his rebuttal was he did not intend to hit him so high. But the thing is that he was reckless with his stick, and he swung his stick intentionally, trying to make contact, and he had to know that he was going to get him fairly high up in the body, considering the angle and everything was taking place at. So to me, I mean, I know we often disagree or sometimes are confused by NHL player safety decisions. Sometimes I think they get it bang on, other times I don't think they get it right. But in my opinion now, I just think this should have been more. And the reason is that it was clearly intentional. You cannot be doing that. He was also only given a minor penalty, which I also found quite alarming. And Kuznetsov had a huge third period after this incident took place and helped Washington come back and beat the Canucks. So Kuznetsov, to me, that could have been a major penalty and kicked out of the game, in my opinion. That would have had a major impact on the outcome of the game. And then, of course, that would have also impacted the outcome here. So considering it wasn't a major penalty and he only gets 1 game, I'm just surprised. Now, Kuznetsov does not have a suspension history, which obviously is in his favor to not get too much of a severe infraction here. But he has been fined once in the history of his NHL career, which not overly relevant to this specific situation, so it's not a huge deal, but still, I don't know, it's just when it was clear intent, and they even said so in the video they released acknowledging the suspension, that it was an intentional swing of the stick that connected with the face. I just think things like that should be a little bit more severely punished. I mean, a lot of times when there's different hits that are bad, a lot of times you can tell that the player is trying to make a hockey play, maybe makes a bad choice, but it's not necessarily intentional per se. Anyway, 1 game for Kuznetsov. I think it should have been more, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are down in the comments, so certainly feel free to give us your opinions. Some injury updates. Some players going to be going in and out of the NHL's injury reserve program here. We got Alex Iafallo with the LA Kings. Iafallo is going to be out what they're calling week to week. Right now, LA Kings are on the road on a road trip, and he's heading back to LA for further evaluation. So we don't really know any further details than that. They haven't released anything more specific, but he is going to be out for a little while. So that's certainly a big blow for the Kings. Of course, Kings didn't have a great start to the season, so losing an important forward, certainly not ideal. Chicago Blackhawks prospect Frank Nazar, who was a first-round pick of the Hawks in the 22 NHL draft, is going to be out for a significant period of time. Not quite clear exactly when he's going to be able to play, but currently he's with the University of Michigan. He entered training camp into the season dealing with an injury, some sort of a lower body injury, and they've kind of determined at this point that surgery is the best course of action to correct it and get him moving forward here, and it's going to require a lengthy recovery. So we don't know the exact time frame. The only details that were kind of released was that it was going to be a significant recovery, and he's going to miss a big chunk of the season. So that's certainly not great for his development for his draft plus one season. So we'll see how that impacts him and if he can get back before the end of the year and obviously help the University of Michigan towards the end of the season. The Florida Panthers are certainly, in my opinion, don't have the deepest blue line after the Mackenzie Weegar trade going to the Flames in that big blockbuster deal involving Huberdeau and Tkachuk. I think the Panthers are still a really good team, but I think it's fair to say that their forward group is as good or better as before. I don't know about the blue line, though. I think the blue line's a little bit weaker. Brandon Montour was already injured, and then Aaron Ekblad left last night's game against the Boston Bruins with a lower body injury as well. So if those two D-men end up out with any extended time, that could bold some pretty serious issues. They ended up dropping that game to the Bruins, who are now 3-0. Bruins then head into Ottawa tonight to play another game on a back-to-back, Ottawa's home opener, and we'll see how this impacts the Panthers, though. Like, losing two more defensemen back there, not great, and we'll see how they move forward. Jake Allen returns for the Montreal Canadiens. He'll be back for the next game. Of course, he missed last night's game due to parental leave. His wife was due to give birth to their third child, which she has done, and he now has 3 girls. So congratulations, Jake and Shannon and family, and he'll be returning to the Montreal Canadiens, be back suited up for the next game. We also saw some other players leave games last night, including Connor Brown of the Capitals, left that same game we were talking about with the Kuznetsov suspension. So Connor Brown left early. Not quite clear if he's going to be out longer term or what the deal is, but he is possibly heading for IR. Jake Muzzin, another more serious or potentially serious situation, left the game with the Coyotes. Of course, the Leafs and the Coyotes game last night got a lot of attention with the Coyotes winning in Toronto 4-2. He left the game with what they're calling a neck injury. I'm not really sure. I don't have any reason to say that it's a concussion, but just when he left the ice, it did look like, because he got hit in the face area, and it looked like it could be, and he obviously has a history of concussions, and obviously some back issues and stuff too, so that is just not good. I don't know what's going to make of this. We don't have any further updates from the Leafs as of yet. But that situation in Toronto is certainly getting a lot of attention with not only the Muzzin injury, the blue line's getting banged up early. Of course, Liljegren started the season out for 6 weeks, which was not great. And without Muzzin back there, that certainly, eliminates, a very physical defender back there who's an important guy who plays in all situations. But the Leafs dropping that game to the Coyotes certainly drew a lot of attention. I know the Leaf fans at one point were booing. The first 2 periods, the Leafs were... I don't know what to say. Like, even the Coyotes thought that the Leafs weren't trying their hardest. The Christian Fischer interview after the game made a comment saying that the Leafs were far from their best effort in the first 40 minutes of the game. Some people said that the Leafs were maybe taking the Coyotes for granted, maybe skating a little arrogantly as a team that they most definitely should have beat, and maybe took it a little too easy, took themselves to win, and just never tried hard enough. I don't know if that's the case, but I know that's what a lot of people are saying. I did watch most of that game last night, and I know certainly at times it did appear like you wonder where the Leafs were. Sheldon Keefe made some comments after the game, basically saying that the elite players on the team have not been elite this season and need to get going, which I think is also fair to say. I think Nylander's been good. I don't know that the rest have been consistently good. Tavares has actually been all right. I've been somewhat impressed with that line, but the Matthews-Marner line especially, a bit quiet. I mean, they do have a few points, but I think Matthews, I'm surprised, hasn't scored more, and we'll see. I know he's made a conscious effort to be a more physical player this year. I've heard comments from that, and I've seen it firsthand in their action, so I don't know if maybe they just need to maybe adjust their focus a little bit or what it is, but certainly not the start to the season that the Leafs were hoping for after losing to the Habs. Now they lose to the Coyotes. 2 teams expected to be near the bottom of the standings by the end of the year, and that's not great. I know, like I said, Sheldon Keefe has called his team out twice now, which you got to wonder how far that's going to go if it continues happening. And of course, near the end of the game, though, before the Coyotes made it 4-2, the Leafs thought they had tied it 3-3, and it ended up getting called back due to a missed stoppage in play as a result of a hand pass. So I know there's a lot of people online that were really confused over this. So essentially the Coyotes were trying to clear the puck. It was about to go out of the zone. Morgan Reilly bats it down with his hand, which you're allowed to do. But of course, ideally, when you touch the puck with your hand, you want to be the next person to touch that puck before anybody else so that play continues. If the opponents touch it, that's fine as well if they have possession, but you can't bat it to a teammate. And even though you may not be personally trying to direct it to a teammate, it's still considered a hand pass if you play it with your hand and your teammate is the next one to touch the puck. Now, of course, the rule states that you can't intentionally do that. It says that you can't intentionally basically redirect the puck to a teammate, but it also says or create an advantage where your team gains possession of the puck, which is something that a lot of people were not looking at. They were only reading the first part of the rule saying that's not a hand pass. Yeah, you know what? He wasn't intending to hand pass, and I have no doubt he was just trying to keep the puck in. But the fact of the matter is that the Coyotes never got possession. Reilly was tied up with, I believe it was Clayton Keller, so he couldn't get a stick on it or technically have possession or play it. And Marner comes in and grabs the puck. That is technically a hand pass, and it's the right call. I understand that a lot of people are frustrated with video review, but at the end of the day, it was the correct call, and that's just the way it is. So it was a bit of a controversial night in Toronto for sure. And then, of course, you throw the Jake Muzzin injury on top of things, and it's certainly not a great evening in Leafland. But in the Canucks world, things were not much better either. The Vancouver Canucks set an NHL record that I don't think any team really ever wants to be a part of. They set a record by being the only team in NHL history to blow a multi-goal game 3 straight games to start their season. So right now the Canucks are 0-3, and they've had multi-goal games, 2 goals or better leads in all 3 of those games. So they're certainly having trouble defending, and that's, I think, for all parts of the team. I don't think it's on just the defense score. I've seen some pretty sloppy, bad defensive plays from the forward group as well. Of course, Thatcher Demko is human, which they've been proven as well. He can only bail you out so much, which I don't think this is all on him either. And at the end of the day, the Vancouver Canucks are creating a lot of pressure on themselves. Apparently, after last night's game, they didn't let the coaches in, and they had a players-only meeting. So to do that after 3 games of the season, that's almost unheard of. So they certainly feel like there's big issues. You have to think that after the real rocky offseason between Bruce Boudreau and the management of the Canucks, that I think that he's on the hot seat. Now, of course, if they were to make a change in the coaching world right now and remove Boudreau as head coach, they'd be getting a ton of questions saying, why are you doing this now? Why didn't you just make the change in the offseason? So I don't think we're going to see this go too far. I think I'll be surprised if things don't turn around that Boudreau gets to game 10. I know a lot of times we say when coaches are on the hot seat at the start of the year, like the first 20 games are like the, that key metric or that measurement part. I don't know if it's going to get that far unless we see a turnaround quickly. But if things, let's say they get to if they get to 0-4, 0-5, I don't know, man. All bets are off. I don't know that it's the right thing to do that quickly, but I wouldn't be shocked either. Like, there's a lot of tension and a lot of pressure in Vancouver, and they're not having a great start. Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price is set to speak to the media on October 24th, so mark that on your calendars. I did have a video out on the channel, I believe it was last week. I put out that video when there was an Athletic article updating his situation and interviewed him, where we got a lot more details on the more specifics of the knee and what was going on and all that. And I seriously question whether his career could be over, and I wonder what he's going to say. I did say in that video as well that he was expected to speak to the media sometime this month. Now we know when it's going to happen. So October 24th, we should get an update from Price himself. Be interesting to hear what he's got to say. NHL is in New York City for the NHL Board of Governors meetings. I know there's lots of reporters there to cover that. It likely won't be the most newsworthy of conferences, but they're luckily looking at some projections based on early revenues, salary cap, those types of things. And we could get an update on the Hockey Canada situation with the investigation that's being completed by the NHL. Gary Bettman did give a quote to Sportsnet saying that they're a lot closer to the end than the beginning of the investigation, which I would hope so, considering how long it's been going on. I don't know for sure that we'll get an update during this Board of Governors meeting, but I do suspect that Gary Bettman will likely have what they call like a State of the Union type of address at some point here over that time frame when these meetings are going on. As far as some trades go, we want to take a look at here today, some trade rumors. There's an article from the Chicago Sun-Times talking about the Blackhawks, of course, and wondering if Seth Jones is actually going to be a tradable asset for the Blackhawks. Now, of course, he's in the very beginning of that massive 8-year contract that he signed after being traded from Columbus to Chicago, which ultimately now, in retrospect, looks like an absolutely huge mistake for Chicago, considering everything that happened shortly thereafter, the whole Kyle Beach thing that became public. Lots of people lost their jobs. The team's gone through a major teardown ever since. Like, a lot of people have left. It's just completely different than when that trade took place. Like, a lot has changed. And this team is expected to be bottom dwellers for, according to Kyle Davidson, upwards of 5 years as they go through a full teardown and rebuild. So I'm sure it's going to be a lot of tough times and a lot of tough games for Seth Jones if he decides to remain in Chicago. And of course, because of this contract, it's a lot of money, so obviously it's tough to move given a tight cap situation. Of course, there's trade protection in his contract, which complicates things further. But at the same time, you have to think at some point, probably not just yet. This is more about something we could see more likely down the road. Like, I don't foresee this being anything that happens like, in the next few weeks or even few months. This is more of an article looking at the broader scope of the short-term future. And to be honest, I think with the information that we've been given from the league through Sportsnet, that the salary cap is expected to rise about, say, $9 to $10 million over the next 3 to 4 years. That certainly creates a lot more breathing room for teams, and maybe a Seth Jones trade could actually be feasible after all. But of course, the Blackhawks and Jones will have to have that discussion. I wonder if Kyle Davidson maybe tackles this maybe in the offseason. Obviously, he's got to deal with Kane and Jonathan Taves in the short term. They're near the end of their contracts. They're expected to be the big names that are possibly traded before this year's NHL trade deadline. We've talked about that off and on over the last number of weeks and months because there's lots of talk and speculation of where they may end up, where they may want to go, what kind of return, like all those types of things that kind of connect with that. And then after those contracts are taken care of, then will he turn his attention to Jones? It's really hard to say what the future holds. The other possibility, of course, is that he'd really be the only player under a long-term, bigger money deal. So it helps him get to the cap floor for one thing. And maybe he's the veteran guy that sticks around, becomes the next captain after Jonathan Taves leaves. And maybe he embraces the role that way. I mean, certainly, like I said, as much as it's not what he envisioned in the least, I'm sure it's not what the team envisioned in the least, considering it was different people running the team at the time. But at the same time, there are, lots of reasons why they should keep him, and there's lots of reasons why they should not keep him. Really, like, think about, moving on from all that money off their books will be very helpful financially. They might be able to get a few assets for their future, which could help out. And then it really creates a lot more flexible cap situation. But at the same time, with that really being the only major long-term deal in the books, at least it's not nearly as bad as some other teams find themselves in. So we'll see. I do think a rising cap does make it a bit easier for sure. I don't think they're going to be something that they're going to tackle or really dive into or really give serious thought to until at least the offseason. Even then, it still might be a little bit early. But I'm not sure that Jones completes the contract in Chicago, whereas, maybe 6 months to a year ago, I would have said absolutely no chance that Jones leaves because of the contract being so difficult to move. But as the cap goes up, it will get easier for sure. And could we see a trade between Montreal and Boston? There are reports out there that indicate the Montreal Canadiens were very interested in claiming defenseman Mike Reilly when he was on waivers from the Bruins not too long ago near the beginning of the NHL season. Of course, Mike Reilly has history in Montreal. We know that the Montreal Canadiens are running a very inexperienced blue line, and I must say, though, considering all things, those kids are doing okay back there so far, especially Caden Gooley's been a pleasant surprise, having a real strong start to the season. That's very much a plus and a bonus for the Montreal Canadiens. But do they want to give Gooley, Jacki, Jordan Harris, do they want to have them in the NHL for the entire season? Would they like to have a little bit more NHL caliber quality defensemen? Lighten their responsibilities and their loads a little bit, take the pressure off. Probably wouldn't be a terrible idea. Creates a little bit more flexibility. But the main reason they didn't put that claim in is they just couldn't make it work from a salary cap perspective. So as I've talked about before, sometimes you see players clear waivers and then later be traded because the team just couldn't, they needed to have money go out to make it work, Or, of course, if they've already cleared waivers, then maybe they can be assigned to the minors in that system when they're first acquired. Now, in the case of Mike Reilly, once you clear waivers, you've got, I think it's like 24 days or 10 games. Once you've played that or that time period's elapsed, then you'd have to clear waivers again to go to the minors. So we'll see. Now, I'm not sure this deal is something that we could see in the short term, but just where there was interest there before, we know the Bruins are going to be getting some defensemen back healthy, like Grzelcyk and McAvoy, and it could create a situation where Reilly kind of becomes the, bumped out of the lineup, so to speak. It was expected before they ran into further injuries, and Brandon Carlo is also out now, which complicates things. Is the other reason why I don't think we're going to see this trade for some time, because you got your 3 top defensemen all on injury reserve right now. So over time, as these guys make themselves, rehab everything and come back, there's going to be a logjam there. There might not be a spot for guys like Reilly, who clearly was the odd man out at the start of the season. The Bruins were willing to let him go on waivers, so I think they'd be willing to move him for a small return. The Montreal Canadiens also have a lot of forwards that they would like to move. Maybe they swap one of those forwards for Reilly in return. We know guys like Dadonov and Hoffman have been, to say the least, not impressive so far this year, which obviously doesn't help their trade value at the same time either. I don't know if Boston would be having interest in either of those guys, but certainly a situation where, they have a bulk of forwards. They want some help on the blue line. The Bruins, if anything, could probably use an extra forward as well. Maybe we see a swap that way, and Reilly could eventually maybe end up back in Montreal before the end of the year. Hard to say, just where there was reported interest. They just couldn't make it work from the cap. I think it's a scenario worth keeping an eye on and watching as we move forward here, and as that Bruins team gets healthier, it could create an opportunity. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.